Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful May the 7th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we had a little bit of a weather swing down here, but once again, I want to say thank you and stay safe to our frontline healthcare workers who do so admirably every day, Charlton, to go out there and fight against this epic COVID-19 battle that they're waging, Charlton, and they stay strong and stay safe.
It's always good to stay strong and safe. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, just tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, Big C Sports is powered by Google. And Alexa, just say Google, or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV or you'll be staring at a still picture. It's all fair and love of war. I want to make sure we give away our military crisis hotline. They really are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help. In fact, they're helping so many people nowadays. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, we should never forget about those who have given so much for us to be free and safe in this country. And as we fight against this epic COVID-19 battle, Charlton, we think about our veterans who are out there who are struggling mentally and physically every day. And some 19 of those, Charlton, have lost their lives to suicide on average in America every day. And as we talk about staying safe during this epic battle against COVID, about being sanitary, wash your hands, and, don't touch your face. How can you stay sanitary when your home, is a sidewalk, Charlton, and you're living homeless? But we have to find a way to get them this 1-800-suicide prevention hotline number, Charlton, because so many of those veterans struggle with mental battles, and they need someone to talk to who is not judgmental, to walk them off that cliff. And we have to find a way as a country and as a people to be more empathetic for those who have given so much for us.
Just like Seal said, they need someone peaceful, not judgmental. 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can hopefully get some help. Really appreciate the work that they're doing, helping everybody that gives them a call. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. When you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. And we're looking for 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on TV. Just like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, sports events do it, and you can watch TV work for your real estate. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. Also, those looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com. And there's opportunities in real estate also. Really appreciate that. I know there's a lot going on, and I know they've also talked about having the release of the NFL schedule tonight. There's a lot of things coming out of the White House, Big C, that the White House disagrees with the CDC's thoughts on reopening the country, and that's all fair and love and war. But I want to start here because this thing about baseball in Seoul, South Korea, it really has me paying attention to about at least 5 minutes of highlights. I've been watching about 5 minutes of highlights, Big C, coming from Seoul, South Korea. But there are 76 full-time umpires in Major League Baseball, and the maximum salary that you can make during a season is $480,000. And you think about that, that's a lot of money. And so with the upcoming of the baseball season, they've been regulated to take a 25% pay cut. Considering $480,000, I'd be honored to take a pay cut. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's the maximum salary that they can take. So you know the guys who come into the league as new umpires, they're going to make it in excess of $100,000. And that's not a bad gig for a summer job, as you think about it. Plus, there's bonuses that arrive for those umpires who make it to the postseason, and they're selected by their peers based on performance that they've had throughout the regular season.
Yeah.
But, they're also talking about, the umpires taking a 25% pay cut this year. And I don't know if that's going to boast well with them, but it's something that should be seriously considered, as well as with all the other professional leagues as you look at it. If you're going to have amended schedules and you're not playing your full boat of games, there's no reason for you to get the full boat of money that you should normally get throughout a regular season.
Yeah.
And so as baseball is struggling to find a time that they may start their regular season, I know right now they're talking about potentially July that baseball is starting, but there's no timetable set yet for it.
Yeah, and when you think about how much money's out there, it's all, not that it's insensitive, it's just the fact we have millions of people that are laid off or furloughed or whatever they're going through, and again, thoughts and prayers with that. But you think about it, there's an exclusive group of people in the world of baseball, then they're going to have to take a pay cut too, but sometimes they make more money in 1 year than people make in a lifetime. You think about guys like Mike Trout and then Garrett Cole. There's about 65 players that earn over $100,000 per game. So if they take a 25% pay cut, they're only going to get $75,000 per game. How are they going to eat, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you talked about that, Charlton, we've had over 30 million Americans, apply for unemployment in this country, Charlton, in the past 2 months, and an excessive number of people. And so, as they talk about reopening the country cannot reopen if you have over 30 million people on unemployment, because they're not just going to be able to walk back in to the workplace and pick up where they once left off. And as we look at all professional athletes, not just baseball players, but baseball has the best union in the world when you talk about professional athletes.
Yep.
They have worked hard and diligently and stayed together. They haven't fought against each other. They've made sure that the next guy up is going to get the next best contract available, and that's what's been good about baseball.
Yeah, it's been good about baseball, but I wanna ask you, there's always a story growing up where they have everything going great for them in life, and they ride around in the neighborhood, and people are struggling. So with the world, no matter what people think about it, it's just my opinion, the world is having to relook at things, Big C. We have an amazing amount of players that some of them even make over $200,000 per game. There's at least 65 players in Major League Baseball, as they're talking about should be allowed the season to begin or not. At least 65 players that make $100,000 each. I mean, that's whether they win or lose. There are people looking for that kind of income in a whole season, Big C. So is baseball going to seem obtuse, or will they have a change of heart? Either one, stop disclosing incomes like President Trump. He doesn't disclose his income. I think it's very insensitive for Major League Baseball to flout players that make $200,000 per game, whether they win or lose, and there's 30 million people looking for work. Baseball can hurt itself by doing that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you have to look at corporate America, Charlton. Look at the bailout that the government just gave out there, the trillions of dollars that they just passed out, and majority of it went to corporate America, Charlton. They're paying these corporate CEOs, executives, and also paying them bonuses out of that money. They're making way more money than what professional baseball players are, and it's never disclosed. One of the things about professional athletes, you see their salaries in the media, but you don't see any of the CEOs and corporate executive salaries in the media from the airlines, Charlton, that the government just bailed out, from all the major industries in America that the government just bailed out. You don't see their salaries, and they're making way more money than baseball players are. Those baseball players have to negotiate for that, and yet some of it's guaranteed, but not all of it's guaranteed.
Yeah.
But how do you justify in an industry like the airline industry that you bail out the airline industry, and yet they're laying off employees, but yet all the corporate executives within that industry were receiving bonuses and their full salaries and was not taking pay cuts?
Yeah, well, I think the point there is when you say corporate America, that's nebulous. Nobody knows who the name is of that person. But I'm talking about...
Yeah, but see, baseball is not employing those people. The airline industry, think about when you lose 95% of your flight loads, and that's what the airline industry has lost over the last 2 months.
Yeah.
And you get rid of 70% of your employees, that you furlough them out. Baseball didn't furlough out the players. They're sitting around waiting on the season to resume, hopefully to get their paydays. I'm talking about these executives who are not flying planes, that are sitting in boardrooms and have the multiple homes more than what athletes do. They take away the income from people. Baseball didn't take away the income.
Yeah.
Corporate America took away income, and yet we can't look at athletes. We can't look at athletes to be all, to fix all every time there's a problem in America, because they're not the ones employing somebody. They all have owners that are writing the checks that don't wince any time they pay their player $200,000 a game.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Again, corporate America can hide themselves, and because they're not out there running around the bases. Guys like Mike Trout, I think he's 28 or 29 years old for the Los Angeles Angels, making about $36 million a year. And, of course, people can make what they make. This is America. But the fact is, no one will ever know how much money Donald Trump makes because he won't disclose his taxes. And I think sports in general is hurting itself when they're telling you to come pay attention to superstars that have never really won anything as a team, and guys that are making, $220,000 a game, and guys like Cole, I think his name is Garrett Cole. But everybody has their own price. I just think at some point in time, that thought you brought up last week, I believe, you said Jameis Winston took $1 million salary to be a backup quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Now, $1 million, anyone in society would say, yes, I'll sign the contract for $1 million. The fact that these guys have so much money, and you have people in L.A. in food lines, it just doesn't have a nice pitch to it. Even though they're getting paid by corporate America, I think it's still a bad look for baseball, and I would love to see if they would just stop disclosing salaries. They don't disclose salaries of people who work for the organizations. It doesn't make sense they do it for the players. Do you think that will ever change, though, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it will ever change, and I don't think that it should change, Dalton, because one of the reasons why people pay the prices that they pay to get into events is because they pay to see the best, and the best get paid as the best. And so when you see these events and you see the salaries of athletes, I mean, and all the top athletes, regardless of the sport, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, hockey, all of the top athletes want to be paid like the top. I mean, you look at some of the salaries in the NBA, they equal to what baseball are. Baseball has the best salaries of everybody because their money is guaranteed. But when you look around in the NFL and they're looking at this free agency run and what players are out there trying to sign for and signing for in free agency, wanting $30 million a year, $40 million a year.
Yeah.
But yet people are dying for sports in America. They said bring sports back regardless of the physical cost of the event. Bring the sports back. We will pay whatever it takes to get into a venue. You look at Super Bowl ticket prices where people are paying $10,000 to $15,000 or more for one Super Bowl ticket. I remember a couple of years ago when the Warriors were playing the Cavaliers out there in Oakland.
Yeah.
And people were paying, I think the highest price a gentleman paid for 2 tickets for that game was, I think it was $98,000. It was $78,000 or $98,000 he paid for 2 tickets for a Game 5 out there in the Bay Area. So when you look at that and people say, well, the athlete is making this kind of money, think about the person who sits courtside for an entire season in Madison Square Garden or Staples Center, the highest priced tickets in the NBA where they're paying $5,000 a ticket to sit there, and you have to buy the season package, which is 41 home games, and that's times 5. So you're paying that type of money to watch a basketball team for a season. You're paying almost $250,000.
Yeah, and when you have that kind of money, it's just like shaking hands. Everybody, it's all over the place, so it's not really a big deal for the people
but
that live in that world.
As you say that, who's complaining about the person who's sitting in the front row of the basketball arena for 41 games versus the athletes making the money? I mean, and they're just as visual on the TV camera as everybody else.
Yeah, but nobody knows them, and that they're not the ones that people are paying to come see. It's all fair and love and war. That's what capitalism is. It's just, I juxtapose that to people sitting in food lines that are going on for several blocks. But it's just part of life. I do want to just stay at least Major League Baseball, they've done something that we talk about on every show. The Major League Baseball Union, they've awarded grants to aid domestic violence victims. And everybody can say domestic violence. There's no room for it. We all say that, but it's nice when you have organizations that can pay guys $200,000 a game. They have 6 organizations that aid survivors of domestic violence. And among the groups that will receive is $50,000 each from Major League Baseball and the Players Association. And that's part of a Healthy Relationships Community Grant initiative. I think that's great that baseball is at least doing their part. It's not their fault if someone decides to stay in that type of relationship, but it is nice that they put it out there that they're trying to help in some way. Big C, your thoughts?
All the professional leagues are advocates against domestic violence, Charlton, and they've all supported against domestic violence and put together counseling and things of that nature. These are one of the things that, when you think about professional organizations who sponsor this non-domestic violence scenarios, they don't need to go out there on television saying, hey, we're donating this type of money to combat domestic violence. You do it quietly because you're not trying to bring attention to yourself. You're trying to stop, which is an affliction and a disease in this country also, domestic violence. So, you applaud any company that does that, as well as private companies do that, Charlton. I mean, everybody should do their part to combat domestic violence.
Yeah, they really should. And just for people, I won't get into it too much because I don't know enough about it, but Earl Thomas, something happened with he and his spouse. People do what they want to do, but it goes both ways. It's not just about men that are out trying to harm women. Sometimes it can go both ways. But I do want to touch on something that I do know about. If we go to Taiwan, in Taipei, Taiwan, Big C, baseball leagues are set to allow fans back into the ballparks. We just started talking about some athletes in Major League Baseball make $100,000 a game. I think there's at least 65 players that make $100,000 per game. That's 9 innings of work. Takes about 3 hours if you have a long game. But I do understand California's still on lockdown. They're trying to ease restrictions right now, but they're allowing fans to enter baseball stadiums for games in Taiwan for the first time this season, and that's part of a gradual easing of restrictions. The China Professional Baseball League set up to I think it's about 1,000 people they were saying. They'll be permitted to enter ballparks on Friday after an agreement between the league and Taiwan's Central Epidemic Command Center, which is analogous to what we have in the World Health Organization and also the Centers for Disease Control, telling the White House that they're going a little bit too fast. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the White House understands that they're going too fast, Charlton, but who can tell the president what's right and what's wrong? His concern is not the empathy of the American citizen. He's concerned about how his numbers look. And he thinks that if, he allegedly reopens his country, and the country's never been closed, it's just a stay-at-home order for people to protect themselves against the COVID-19. I mean, because people have been functioning in society every day. But as we look at the numbers that have risen, in this COVID battle, Charlton, we have over, 1.2 million Americans that have tested positive for this disease.
Wow.
Today, it's reached over 75,000 deaths in America, Charlton. Loss of life of American citizens. It's gone up over 2,500 since yesterday, the same time. We've lost over 2,500 American citizens. And there's no slowing down in sight. And as they're talking about opening up 43 states by this weekend in some portions, what's going to happen to social distancing and people wearing protective masks? I mean, you're throwing it out the window. All that's been tried by the CDC and the health officials on this coronavirus, task force, that the president says, no, we need to go out there. And if we lose more American lives, oh, well, these things are going to happen. And even today, his personal valet tested positive for the coronavirus, Charlton. This is a guy who's in contact with the president every day. So think about how many people he's been in contact with in the White House. And if the president ends up with COVID, would they announce it?
No, they won't tell you. They'll tell his tax returns before they show if he has a positive test for COVID-19. They just won't do that, Big C. I do want to just, because everybody has their own thoughts. I'm kind of torn between it. I like medical science. In fact, I love medical science. So it's a kind of a good thing. NBA players and their staff are asked to help with virus researchers. So if they can use NBA players, the thing that we haven't heard much about is these athletes that are, for the most part, in peak physical condition. They may not have some of the underlying health conditions that put people in peril. And I would love to find out, when these athletes test positive for COVID-19 and they come out of it fine. I mean, there have been, as far as I know, no fatalities from some of these athletes, but the general population is hit more harder. What do they know that the general population doesn't know? And you have people, doctors at the Mayo Clinic, which is starting to get support from the NBA and its players for a study that will aim to shed more light on how the antibody testing can help the medical world further understand COVID-19. And there were NBA teams this week that were told about the study, and there are a lot of players who are volunteering. So it's as if we have the solution, it's already there, but we're doing less study on who survived it and how that can be used to help the general population. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure if they're doing less study on who survived it. I mean, we're just hearing more and more about the number of people that test positive. So, but if you think about it, you have tested because you got, over 1.2 million people that have tested positive that have survived, Charlton, versus the 75,000 deaths that we've unfortunately suffered in this country. So there is a lot of research that's going towards that. And a lot of these people that have tested positive that have survived, they've gotten immediate medical help.
Yeah.
And I'm a personal testament to that. When you get immediate medical help and you're not sitting there not being able to have access to a doctor, not having access to medical care, that is the key. And when you think about professional athletes, they have instant access to medical assistance, Charlton, all the time. They have team doctors. They have personal doctors. They have medical insurance. And so when we think about the number of people that have survived this COVID-19 in this country, that is because of medical research and medical assistance.
Yeah.
And they're taking samples from all of those people, Charlton. The research and finding a antidote to this thing, no antidote is discovered in less than a year.
Yeah.
So we're talking normally 12 to 18 months to find an antidote for anything. So with all the research they're doing, the plasma research as well as the antibodies, you're talking a year to a year and a half to find any type of vaccine or any similarity to one that might help people.
And the great thing about that is these professional athletes that we know about, we don't know about general population, but they don't need to wait for a vaccine because from what I understand, they're already okay. And in fact, they've done so well in rebounding from it. They're talking about how can we start playing games again. I want to ask your thoughts, though. If the NBA is to return this year, is there any concern? We have primarily, there's two elderly coaches in the league, Mike D'Antonio of the Houston Rockets. He's 69 years old. And then you have Greg Popovich of the San Antonio Spurs. He's over 70. Now, they don't have the young, spry, athletic, health that these young athletes that they coach have. So when we put athletes out there and we say, hey, these guys are great, they're strong, they can get sick, and they'll bounce back again, they can run up and down the court, no problem. What about their coaches, the elderly coaches? Are we even considering that we might be putting them in harm's way, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, that would have to be first and foremost in the team's and owner's mind, Charlton, are these two elderly coaches. As you said, D'Antonio is 69 and Popovich well over 70.
Yeah.
And that's been the number one talk of the pandemic, that it affects the elderly citizens more than anybody.
Yeah.
So these two coaches would continuously be in harm's way, Charlton, not just because they're sitting on the bench adjacent to their players, but you think about the fans that are sitting adjacent to them also, right behind them and on the side of them.
Yep.
So they're going to constantly be around, as we think about pathogens moving through the air.
Yeah.
And so what type of risk would that really put them in? Not only those head coaches, Charlton, but think about some of the elderly assistant coaches that are in the NBA also.
Yeah, the same thing in there too. Having a little bit of issue with the microphone, but I know the weather's kind of inclement. We'll clear it up. I want to get your thoughts on something. I believe you said something that I wasn't aware of. Did you say that POTUS's driver tested positive for COVID-19? Is that what you said, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, his personal valet, the person who is with him all the time, who was assisting him in his living quarters, positive today.
Yeah. Okay, we're still having some static on the mic, but I think I heard you say that one of his assistants did. And I know that everybody's saying, wipe everything down. You're going to make sure we sterilize everything. And it just goes back to what you're saying. if you can't keep the president of the United States safe with all the security, all the medical care, and everybody making sure that they do the best part they can. Okay, Big C, I think we were having a little bit of static on the mic, but it's all fair in love and war. So if the White House can't even keep the president's valet guy safe and screen him, they're telling the CDC that we don't agree that we're opening too fast. Maybe nature's giving everybody a clue. The same people that tell us how it's safe to get back to socializing and shaking hands and doing whatever it is, if they can't keep their own people safe, what does that say for the general population, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, this lets you know that everyone can be afflicted by this, Charlton. And so you think about how many people within the White House that the valet comes in touch with every day.
Yeah.
From the president's family through the staff, Charlton. And so people have been exposed to him, so how many people will he test positive on?
Yeah, and they'll never tell us, Big C. They'll never tell us. Before we come up on the Big C pause, also the Big C timeout, I know they're talking about the NFL schedule that's already been released today. We'll touch on a few things later, but I think, just again, to reiterate, 43 states are to be at least partially reopened by this weekend as the United States death toll of COVID-19, it exceeds 75,000 people who have succumbed to it. This is not naive to say this, and I hope I'm saying it in the right way. There have been no athletes, at least that I know of, in the United States. There may be some, but we haven't heard of any athletes that have passed away from COVID-19. And I know they're in the peak shape of their lives. I know it affects young and old. I know there's so many things. Even Spike Lee is doing something tonight on I believe CNN, and some other medical doctors are going to be on there. And I would love to hear how people are being safe. I was talking to my oldest brother today, and he served in the military. And so he talked about being out to go pay some bills today, and there were people out that don't have a mask. They're not practicing social distancing. They're going about life as if we're still living, some 10 years ago. And I just wonder, with the president's own staff, at least one that they told us about, will that make them start listening? Maybe we should listen to the CDC, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you've dismantled and muffled the CDC, Charlton, that no information comes out of the CDC anymore. And you think about the CDC handling SARS and Ebola and AIDS in this country, Charlton, and having task force that worked hand in hand with them and took their advice. The CDC has been voiced for around the world wherever pandemics have broken out. The CDC has been in the forefront of information and assistance. We don't have that any longer with the CDC under this current administration. This current administration has stated that they're more intelligent than anybody that they know, the doctors and anyone else. And so whenever something comes up, if he can't figure it out with a pencil and a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper with an eraser on it, Charlton, and if he can't put it on that paper himself, then nobody else can figure it out. And so we're not going to get any information other than from the White House.
Yeah, that's all. It's just, I want people to pay attention to science. I can only do my part. We'll take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And when we come back, we're going to talk more. I want to talk about some things that NBA owner Mark Cuban, I really like him. I've never met him, but he seemed very, very salient and very prescient with his thoughts. And I want to talk more about him when we come back. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on the apps that I love called Google. And Alexa, just say Google. Or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear, welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, Big C, or you'll be staring at a still picture. Really happy to be affiliated with Valley, home of Weekly TV, Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. When you reach out to them, Tell them Big C Stitcher can't wait to get baseball back. Looking for 100 real estate brokers. Put their property listings on TV just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it. You can watch sports on TV when we start playing again. Let TV work for your real estate. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can see about opportunities in the world of real estate. I wanted to just get back, Big C, to a gentleman that I've never met, but he seems to be very prescient. You know, being prescient is having knowledge of things before they happen. That's why I'm very proud of the fact that oftentimes things that you and I talk about, people are doing. Even when you think about it, the universe has made people start following the platform of Big C Sports. How we don't do the show in the same room. We're about 3,000 miles apart, and now everybody's doing their show, calling across the country. So every now and then you get a phone line drop, and that's fair in love and war. But they're doing it all. But I want to ask you about Mark Cuban. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He says that his team will not open practice facilities despite approval from the NBA. Mark Cuban stated that the problem, obviously, is that because we cannot test people, then we cannot assure that everybody's safety is going to be there, whether they're basketball players or anybody else. And that goes directly in the face of what the administration is saying, but he's very prescient as an owner of a team. Big C, your thoughts?
Only if the administration could be as salient as Mark Cuban. And you have to respect Mark Cuban for what he says. He's always been one of the most outspoken owners in the NBA. He's received an absorbent amount of fines for things that he has said against officials and the league. But I think the league and Adam Silver needs to follow the stance of a Mark Cuban. Who do you trust with your life? I mean, that's the ultimate question. Who do you trust with your life? Do you trust the networks who are in dire straits to get games on the air? That's the number one question. And as you look at these players that would have to go out there and put themselves body to body night after night, as we've talked about practicing social distancing, there's no social distancing in sports. Basketball is a contact sport.
Yeah.
It is a sweaty sport. It is a sport where pathogens continuously fly. How do you test the players? How do you test the staff? How do you test everyone within the organization? Because you're going to have to test them every day, Charlton, because they're going to be in and out of that heated environment every day where they're passing body fluids and pathogens back and forth between each other.
Yeah.
So you have to respect Mark Cuban in this aspect. This is about life, realistically. And you say you know of no known death of professional athletes or even minor athletes, Charlton, at this stage. But when you realistically look at it, if something like that was to occur because everyone is in this dire strait to say we got to have sports back. No, we have to keep people alive in America.
Amen to that. You got to be alive before you can do anything in life, and I know that's not as important to a lot of people that are looking at things. I want to just take a little U-turn. I know I was watching on a program, and there were some farmers, I believe they were in the Midwest, and they were saying, and even down in Texas, that they have to destroy some livestock. There's a lot of hamburger places that have been not able to serve hamburgers because they don't have fresh meat. But there have been some farmers that have to destroy livestock because they've had contamination with COVID-19 and a lot of the workers. I know there were some meat packing plants that you just talked about last week, I think in Iowa. And that's a shame. But
Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, there's several states, Charlton, with these huge meat processing plants that the president has put an executive order out is that they have to stay open, and they do not have to operate under OSHA rules. They do not have to go through the health checks that OSHA mandates. They do not have to test the employees. And when you look at all of these meat packing plants, some of these meat packing plants have had in excess of 58% of their employees test positive for this COVID-19 disease, Charlton. And as we talk about meat processing, that means that they're touching the meat.
Yeah.
And they say that this virus lives in a cold environment. All these meat processing plants, Charlton, are cold environments. The meat is packaged cold.
Yeah.
And so how long does it live in the tissue of this animal that they've packaged up and shipped to the grocery stores? So when you talk about the food supply in America and the food supply being the next wave of contaminating human race, Charlton, that's lively, because they say that this came out of the wet markets in Wuhan, China, which it came from animals, dead animals, Charlton. So if it came from dead animals in China and it lived and it transferred over to human beings, those human beings can still transfer that back into the dead animals, Charlton, that they're shipping to the supermarkets for consumers.
Well, they're starting to have issues with that, so we definitely need a vaccine that's going to cure up a lot of things. That's my hope and prayer that science will help us figure that out. I want to touch base, Big C, on the NFL. I know we have the schedule coming out, but I want to get your thoughts. I know when you think about the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, this just some thoughts. There's Chase Daniels for the Detroit Lions, Brian Hoyer, New England Patriots. It's amazing seeing New England Patriots without Tom Brady. There's Kyle Allen, Washington Redskins, Brian Hoyer again for the Patriots. Talk about him, and there's no Brady. Marcus Mariota with the Las Vegas Raiders. You have guys by the name of Jacoby Brissett in Indianapolis for the Colts. The great Nick Foles, who also has a Super Bowl championship ring, now playing for the Chicago Bears. RG3, the Baltimore Ravens. Jameis Winston, New Orleans Saints, with maybe one of the smaller contracts for a guy that's going for over 5,000 yards. And then you have Andy Dalton with the Dallas Cowboys. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, every team in the NFL needs a quality backup. And we see what backup quarterbacks can do for teams. You saw that last year with the Tennessee Titans when Ryan Tannehill came in and took over for Marcus Mariota, and it took them to the AFC Championship game. You saw when Patrick Mahomes went down in Kansas City, and the backup had to come in, and they went 2 or 3 and kept them in the race. We also saw what Teddy Bridgewater did in New Orleans, where he won 5 consecutive starts. So when you're looking at teams and the backups that they have and how important those backups are, when you start with Andy Dalton in Dallas, you got a backup quarterback that has 4 playoff games behind him. He took his team in Cincinnati to the playoffs on 4 separate occasions. And so I would rank him as the top backup quarterback in the NFL. You talked about Jameis Winston, who signed with New Orleans. Not many teams can boast that they've ever had a backup quarterback who has passed for 5,000 yards in a single season and 30 touchdowns, and Jameis Winston has done that. So having a proven backup in your organization, and when you look at, Nick Foles, how many teams have a backup quarterback that have won a Super Bowl? That's the Chicago Bears, and now Nick Foles is there in Chicago, so they have a guarantee at their position. Marcus Mariota may end up challenging in Las Vegas for that starting position at some point. If Derek Carr can't finally get over the hump, if Marcus Mariota can ever show that he has some fire in his belly, Charlton, he could once again become a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Well, he's going to have some fire in his belly because they have a lot of hot chicken wings down in Las Vegas, Big C, if they allow them to start playing. Let me just jump to something then, because talking about backup quarterbacks, I want to start with the AFC. If you look at the AFC, and again, just your opinion, which divisional quarterbacks have the most to prove this year? When you think about Drew, the Denver Broncos, just John Elway, I guess, likes him. He likes everybody. He'll go through a quarterback, it seems like, every other year or every season, it seems. You also have Phillip Rivers, who may have a lot to prove, but he proved last year that he threw a lot of interceptions. But he's with the Colts now, and indoor, maybe it's not as windy indoors as it was in L.A., Big C. Baker Mayfield, who's been much ballyhooed since he came out of Oklahoma with the Cleveland Browns, and Cleveland is just itching. I mean, they're itching for a successful season. Even a 500 season might make them happy in Cleveland. And then you have in the Big Apple, Sam Darnold, one of USC's finest for the New York Jets. Which one of those divisional quarterbacks in the AFC do you think has the most to prove this year, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, all of those guys are going to be under the microscope. You look at Baker Mayfield. He's going to be pushed. He has a quality backup behind him now in Case Keenum that they signed. And Case Keenum, we remember a couple of years ago, the miracle in Minnesota, when he took the Vikings on that miraculous run that they had. And so if Baker Mayfield slips at any time, I can see him finally being replaced if he doesn't deliver on the goods with all the weapons that he has around. I don't know how long the leash is for Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis with the weapons that they have there, and if they keep Jacoby Brissett on the rosters, that they have a veteran there that they know that can play. And if Phillip Rivers is struggling like he did last year with the Chargers, he can easily be replaced in that situation.
I agree wholeheartedly. Let me ask you about the NFC, the division of quarterback that has the most to improve this season. When you think about no matter what happens in the NFC, they get to the playoffs. If they win the NFC, they most likely, unless things fall off in Kansas City, will have to face Patrick Mahomes, who this year, or maybe even Lamar Jackson, but I still like Patrick Mahomes the way he plays better than Lamar, just my opinion. So which NFC divisional quarterback has the most to prove this season? Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys, Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. I really like Teddy Bridgewater and what he can do with in the quarterback position for the Carolina Panthers. And you know they have McCaffrey, who just broke yards last year running in and receiving. And then Jared Goff for the LA Rams. To me, I know who I like, but who do you think has the most to prove this year? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I look at Jared Goff's situation out in the West, and you look at the two quarterbacks that are in front of him. When you think about Jimmy Garoppolo and Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, to me, is the most purest passer of that group. When you look at the AFC West, Kyler Murray is still pulling up the bootstraps there in his second year out there with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
You know, but when you think about Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina, this is a guy that's 5-0 in his last 5 starts.
That's right.
Can he keep that momentum going with the Carolina Panthers? Think about the quarterbacks that are in his division. He is the only one that is not a former MVP. Matt Ryan's a former MVP in Atlanta. Drew Brees, a former MVP in New Orleans. Tom Brady, former MVP in Tampa. So there's a long road of lineage in front of him, but I think he has a lot to prove when it comes to that. And Dak Prescott is playing for his livelihood.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who has not signed his tenure paper in Dallas. They signed Andy Dalton as a capable backup. A lot of pressure is going to be on Dak, even more than it was in the first 4 years that he's been in the league, because there's a lot of money on the table now.
There's a lot of money on the table, but, I mean, Jerry, I don't know. Have you, when I go back to Troy Aikman, when I look at guys like Tony Romo, and then you look at guys like Dak Prescott, I think of those three quarterbacks, one of them does not have a playoff win, and I think that's Romo. But it seems like the guy who didn't win a playoff game for the Cowboys, unless I'm mistaken, is the most loved by Jerry Jones. How do you add that together, Big C? Your thoughts?
Because he looks like him, Charlton. I mean, as far as you ever want to get in sports about contract negotiations, even in the Cam Newton situation, and we saw Colin Kaepernick get ousted outside the NFL, they don't look like the owners. They don't look like the guys who signed the paychecks. And when you have a guy that looks like you, just like when Mike McCarthy got signed in Dallas as a head coach, he spent the night at Jerry Jones' house. He sent Marvin Lewis back to the hotel, okay?
Yeah.
It's the people that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you should never forget about sports. It's not always about statistics. Otherwise, Jameis Winston would have gotten more than $1 million free agent contract after passing for 5,000 yards. He's the only quarterback in the history of the NFL to pass for 5,000 yards and not to have a starting position the next year in the league. So that's the reason why Jerry Jones' love for Troy Aikman and the other
Romo.
kid,
Tony
Romo, is because they look like him. Dak Prescott doesn't. And Dak Prescott has been villainized throughout the media for the past 2 years, that he is not a franchise quarterback. That was never said about Tony Romo, but you've heard that repeatedly, regardless of the complexion or the nationality of these reporters, is that Dak Prescott has not been a franchise quarterback, even though he's outperformed Jared Goff, even though Jared's been to a Super Bowl. Carson Wentz, who has never taken a snap in the fourth quarter of a playoff game in his career, they've gotten paid. Dak Prescott has not gotten paid.
Yeah, I mean, something's going on down there in Dallas, but it's all fair and love and war. I want to ask you for the upcoming NFL season, what are the best conference matchup teams? I go to the AFC East. You have the Miami Dolphins, and you have the New England Patriots without Brady. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I really like that because Brian Flores, you know, is a crony of Bill Belichick. And if you look at how he constructed the Dolphins and the moves that he has made. They were 5-4 in the last 9 games last season. They even beat the Patriots in one of those matchups. They're going to have the advantage when you look at how they've revamped the defense. They had a tremendous draft, Charlton. They have some players that can play. And everybody said, you know, they were tanking for Tua last year. I think they will be challenging for the AFC East this year.
Yeah, I mean, they played very solid coming down the stretch, Big C, and that's without the new draft picks that they've added on with this year's draft. I also want to go to the AFC North. You look at the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns, even though Cleveland really has disappointed over the last decade, but that's still it's a nice-looking media game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Cleveland Browns, and I know last year everybody talked about what they had on paper. Yes, they had it on paper, but this year those guys have had an opportunity to get a year under their belt. They did some upgrades on the offensive line. Baker Mayfield, if somebody can teach him not to speak English, they will have an outstanding season. He has to understand he has Nick Chubb in the backfield, one of the top 3 running backs in the NFL. The offense needs to run through him, and he needs to stay away from the microphone, and they can challenge the Baltimore Ravens for that division.
Yeah, doesn't need to have what they call that chalk room talk. But the AFC South, I think about the Houston Texans and how close they were to knocking off Kansas City last year, defending Super Bowl champion, and the defense just could not stay up, and the offense couldn't keep up. But give me your thoughts on the Houston Texans and then Indianapolis Colts this year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the Indianapolis Colts made some upgrades. They had a tremendous draft. They did well in free agency. They brought in Phillip Rivers. Hopefully they can bring something back from 5 years ago in his career. When I think about the Houston Texans in that division, they're the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
How would Deshaun Watson react to losing his top receiver, Charlton? That's going to be a key. And can the defense stay healthy? If you recall, they lost J.J. Watt with the torn pectoral last year.
Yep.
They lost a couple other key defensive players. If their defense can stay healthy, they should dominate that division, and Indianapolis should finish second.
Yeah, it looks good. We'll see if Houston can adjust to not having one of the best receivers in the league on their team anymore. He's in Arizona now. In the AFC West, home of the defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, and you have the Los Angeles Chargers, who if they don't have people in the seats, maybe they won't get the new energy from the new stadium, SoFi Stadium in Southern California. But you give me your thoughts on the AFC West, Kansas City Chiefs, and the Los Angeles Chargers. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the Chargers, and just 2 years ago, Charlton, they were a playoff team with 12 victories.
Yeah.
But last year they were beset by injuries on defense. They lost a lot of key personnel. They didn't have Derwin James at all throughout the season, and now they're going to get all those guys back. Bosa will be back. He only played half the season last year. And they were riddled on offense with turnovers. When you think about Rivers, he was second in the NFL in turnovers last year, interceptions thrown behind James Winston. And there's a $24 million differential in the contract that the two of them got. But, this is a team, regardless of who they play at quarterback, they have the skill position players to make an impact. They're going to be chasing the Kansas City Chiefs, who is the cream of the crop in the NFL, but the Chargers should move back up the board to second place in the West.
Let's jump over to the NFC, Big C. I know you love Jerry Jones. Has a really nice looking yacht, Big C. In fact, he held his NFL draft on the water. That's a nice looking craft that he has out there in the water down there off the Gulf Coast. NFC East, Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. They played the most important game last year at the end of the season. And the Eagles, they got it done. The Cowboys were not able to clip their wings. Give me your thoughts this year when the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys playing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is coming close to the last run for the Dallas Cowboys, regardless of who they have at quarterback. Their offensive line is starting to age and beat up, and so how long can they stay together? I know they upgraded their receiving core, but they need some pass rush on the defense. They had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Can they piecemeal all that back together? The Eagles were the best team in the NFC East last year. I mean, they needed to upgrade their receiving core. Carson Wentz, if he can make it through the season, they're still going to be the best team in the NFC East.
You don't seem so secure that Carson Wentz may make it through the season. Maybe that's because you studied his past. I want to go to the NFC North. Are people still upset that the Green Bay Packers try to make sure that their team stays relevant in the chase for the NFC North title, Big C? But the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings, they should be button heads, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's still crying about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers hasn't been in a Super Bowl since, I believe, about 2010 or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It's been over a decade since he's been in a Super Bowl. But the media is constantly crying about them drafting Jordan Love. When I looked at the statistics that Aaron Rodgers had against the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game, he completed 70% of his passes in that game.
Yeah.
It's just the defense couldn't stop anybody. The Packers needed more help on defense than what they needed on offense. They couldn't stop the running game of the 49ers.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Vikings, they have a lot of faith in your cousin there at quarterback. They gave him another $66 million. They got rid of Stephon Diggs, though.
Yeah.
They need to, keep Darwin Cook healthy at the running back position. They have a few holes on defense. They lost a couple key players. But I see these two teams battling it out, and I still see Green Bay finishing on top of the division.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I know they had a good run last year. It's nice when you can build your team. I want to go to the NFC South. There's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Tom Brady. However, Drew Brees is still there. I don't think Drew Brees is going to retire before Tom Brady. Brees is maybe talking another year. Brady's talking 2. I think Brees is a little bit younger, can probably at least play as long as Tom Brady. But New Orleans versus Tampa Bay, definitely a TV must-see. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the New Orleans Saints are consistent, players down there in the NFC South, Charlton, year in and year out, regardless of who they plugged in at quarterback, and they bought some insurance with Jameis Winston. If they can keep Kamara healthy this year, it's going to be a big help for their passing game, as they picked up a tight end in all season. And we know what they can do with Thomas at wide receiver, 149 receptions last year. Brady is going to have the best skill position players that he's ever had on any team he's ever played in any season in the NFL. When you think about he inherited 2 1,000-yard all-pro receivers with Tampa Bay, he gets back his safety net in Gronkowski.
Yeah.
The running game will be by committee. They upgraded the offensive line. They have the NFL sack leader on defense. So this will be a true challenge in that division. And as you think about, they're going to be pushed by Atlanta and Carolina also.
Yeah, I really like Carolina to sneak up on some people. I still think they're going to blitz Brady. They're going to blitz him. And he can't get out of the way. And I don't think they're going to be as nice to him as some of his brethren up in the AFC East. I want to come out west where they're always looking for gold. And I know Governor Gavin Newsom, still saying he's not going to open up the state yet. So we'll see if it happens by the time football season is kicking off out here in the West Coast, Big C. You look at the NFC West, and everybody's thinking San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks. But there's something about that little team down in the desert called Arizona that has a quarterback that a lot of people thought should have played baseball or defensive back in Kyler Murray. And I know they beat Seattle. They had San Francisco on the ropes, and they're better this year. And they got a receiver that came out of Texas. They may shock some people in the West, but I want to get your thoughts. The Seattle Seahawks and the 49ers that came right down. It was a game of inches deciding who won the NFC West last year. Big C, your thoughts?
It was a game of inches, but you can't let it come down to a game of inches. And, I mean, when you look at the 49ers, they did some upgrades in the offseason. I mean, this is a team that did not weaken itself in any way. I think it got better. They gave Jimmy Garoppolo even more weapons to work with. This is a team that's going to be hungry because they know what it's like to win. You go from 4 wins to 13 wins, Charlton, and the Super Bowl, you know what it's like to be on top, and you're not going to take a step back. Seattle is still trying to figure itself out. They lost some key defensive players.
Yeah.
They got to get their running game back situated. You got the Russell Wilson there, at where they should be.
Yeah.
But Russell Wilson is not going to be enough by himself to overtake the San Francisco 49ers.
And, they were so hard to beat on the road last year, so they just got to get better at home if you're Seattle this year. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. The app that I love is by Google. And Alexa, just say Google. Our Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV. You'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Really appreciate our affiliation with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, on DirecTV, AT&T, Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. And when you reach out to them, tell them Big C sent you. The goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on TV, just like car dealerships do it, McDonald's does it, and sports teams do it too. Let your TV work for real estate. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. For those of you looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can find out more about opportunities there. You know, we were talking about the NFL and how the schedule came out today, but something that may make you have a little bit of heartburn, because I know you never believed in pass interference, but the NFL is actually ditching its 1 year pass interference rule. They know that it's going to happen almost every play. They can't pick and choose when they call it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, Charlton, they only voted for it to be in for 1 year, and so, you know, no one brought it to the floor for it to be renewed. And, you know, sports deals with human error. The game is played by people, it's officiated by people, and it's always going to have human error in it. But let me give you some breaking news that just came up, Charlton.
Yeah.
The state of Oregon, as we talk about it, 43 states opening up by tomorrow, has canceled all major sporting events, all large gatherings through the month of September.
Wow.
So when you think about who that affects the Portland Trail Blazers. It affects Portland State. It affects Oregon State. It affects the University of Oregon. So as you think about this pandemic and how it's starting to affect people, the state of Oregon has put the first foot on the ground saying, we're not going to put lives in jeopardy. Just like Mark Cuban said, what is more valuable? Is the life of an athlete and a fan more valuable than the pressing issue to get back out there and opening up games? And also, the commissioner of the Canadian Football League came out today and said most likely that the season will be canceled.
Wow.
And you think about the Canadian Football League, it is the oldest football league in North America. I know we just celebrated 100 years of the NFL, and I think this last year the Canadian Football League celebrated its 107th championship.
107.
So it's a league that's a little bit older than the NFL. So as you think about that, you know, we're talking about a state that has canceled all large gatherings and events through the month of September. That means sports. That's college sports and professional sports. And now we have a league north of the border where we had talked about the Prime Minister Trudeau talking about if players come back into the league and in the NHL, is that they were going to have to deal with a 14-day quarantine. So that's the Canadian Football League and the NHL as well as the NBA, Charlton. So we're talking about professional and collegiate sports right now teetering on life support.
Well, you know what, Big C? It's a good thing because that means that they're scientifically inclined. They're not listening to the boy who cried wolf. They're not listening to the people that had their own driver or chauffeur or whoever he was test positive for COVID-19. And there's a lot of smart people that you may fool them once, shame on you. But you fool them twice, then shame on them. If you fool them 3 times, shame on everybody. And I'm glad that science is starting to make a lot more sense. That's good news to announce that. I had no idea, but it makes me happy that they're trying to take care of people more so than money. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, with the news that we just came across about the state of Oregon and the Canadian Football League, I'm waiting on the rest of the commissioners and other sports leagues to follow suit on that, to understand what Mark Cuban said earlier, is that the health and life and safety of human beings is more important than trying to put a product out on a sporting field. And also, once again, I want to say thank you and stay safe to all our frontline healthcare workers.
That is very good news, and I'm so happy that science will dictate how we all live our lives. We got to keep everybody safe. We got to pay attention to science, not to politics. That's just my opinion. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. And as we always tell you, that's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.